The more you understand people, the less they seem to like you. At first, that feels backwards. You would think awareness makes you wiser, calmer, easier to be around. But in reality, the moment you begin to notice what others avoid, what they hide, what they pretend not to feel, your presence starts to disturb them. Not because you said too much, but because they sense you can see too much. Most people move through life on the surface. They don't look too closely at behavior. They don't question motives, and they don't analyze the subtle shifts in tone, expression, or silence. This keeps everything smooth, predictable, comfortable. But when you begin to pay attention, really pay attention, you start noticing patterns that others ignore. You see contradictions between what people say and what they actually do. You notice when someone is being polite, not genuine. And without saying anything at all, that awareness changes how you respond, how you look at them, how you carry yourself. And people feel that shift, even if they can't explain it. But this is where the shift begins. At this point, something subtle begins to happen. You stop reacting the way most people expect. You don't laugh at things that aren't actually funny. You don't agree just to keep the mood light. You don't fill silence just to avoid discomfort. Instead, you observe. You pause. You respond with intention rather than impulse. And while this might feel like control to you, to others, it feels like distance. It feels like you're not playing the same social game anymore. And that's where the tension begins to build. And most people rely on that unspoken social game more than they realize. It's built on small agreements, subtle performances, and mutual illusions that keep interactions smooth. People expect you to nod when they speak, to mirror their emotions, to respond in predictable ways that reassure them everything is normal. But when you begin to see through those patterns, you naturally start stepping outside of them. You hesitate before agreeing. You question things internally instead of accepting them at face value. Your reactions become slower, more deliberate. And even though you're not doing anything aggressive or confrontational, this quiet shift breaks the rhythm that others depend on. It creates a subtle discomfort, like something is slightly off, even if they can't point to what it is. And once you see it, it's difficult to ignore. What unsettles people is not what you say, but what you no longer participate in. You stop reinforcing their assumptions. You stop validating behaviors that once passed without question. You begin to notice the small manipulations, the inconsistencies, the moments where someone is trying to shape how they are perceived rather than simply being honest. And instead of reacting to it, you hold it in silence. That silence is what makes others uneasy. Because when there is no reaction, no confirmation, no predictable response, people lose their sense of control over how they are being seen. And in that moment, they start to wonder what you've understood about them that they haven't openly shown. And that uncertainty is difficult for most people to tolerate. They are used to being read at a surface level, where their words are taken as they are presented, where their tone is not questioned, where their intentions are not examined too closely. But when you begin to see beyond that surface, even subtly, it introduces a kind of pressure into the interaction. They may not consciously think, "This person understands me too well," but they feel it. They sense that something about you is not easily influenced, not easily guided. And when people feel like they can't control how they are perceived, they often respond by pulling away, becoming defensive, or quietly turning against the source of that discomfort. But it doesn't happen as openly as you might expect. This is where awareness starts to carry a cost that most people never talk about. You begin to realize that understanding people deeply does not always bring you closer to them. In many cases, it creates distance, because connection, for most, is not built on full truth. It is built on shared illusions, on mutual agreement to overlook certain things. When you no longer participate in those quiet agreements, even unintentionally, you begin to stand apart. And that distance can feel confusing at first. You're not trying to isolate yourself. You're not trying to challenge anyone directly. But your perception changes the way you engage, and that alone is enough to shift how others respond to you. And over time, you start noticing a pattern that repeats itself across different people and different situations. Conversations become shorter. The tone shifts slightly. Some people become more guarded around you, while others try harder to steer the interaction in a direction they can control. There are moments where you sense a subtle resistance, a quiet tension that wasn't there before. It's not obvious, and it's rarely spoken out loud, but it's consistent. The more aware you become, the more you begin to see that this reaction is not personal. It's a response to what your awareness represents. Because to most people, being understood too clearly feels like exposure. Even if you never say what you see, even if you never confront them, there is a quiet awareness that something about them is no longer hidden. And people are deeply attached to the versions of themselves they present to the world. Those versions are carefully shaped, adjusted depending on who they are around, designed to maintain a certain image. When someone comes along who doesn't fully accept that surface, even silently, it creates a subtle threat. Not a physical threat, but a psychological one. And people instinctively move away from anything that makes them feel exposed in that way. And this is where the reaction becomes subtle. At a deeper level, this reaction is not about you at all. It's about control. Most interactions are built on an unspoken agreement that each person can manage how they are perceived. Through tone, through words, through timing, people constantly adjust themselves to guide the outcome of an interaction. But when you begin to see through those adjustments, that control starts to slip. And when people feel like they can't manage the impression they're making, it creates discomfort. Not because you've challenged them directly, but because your presence makes it harder for them to maintain the version of themselves they rely on. And when that sense of control begins to fade, people rarely respond with openness. They don't suddenly become more honest or self-aware. Instead, they look for ways to restore balance in the only ways they know how. Sometimes that means distancing themselves from you. Sometimes it means subtly discrediting you, framing you as distant, cold, or difficult to read. And other times it shows up as quiet resistance, small shifts in behavior that signal they no longer feel comfortable engaging with you the same way. None of this is usually conscious, but it is consistent. People protect their sense of control, even if it means turning against what unsettles it, which is why most people misread what's happening. And this is where most people make a mistake. Once they notice this shift, they try to correct it. They start explaining themselves more, softening their tone, forcing reactions that feel more normal, just to restore that lost sense of connection. But in doing that, they move back toward the same surface-level patterns they had already outgrown. They begin to hide their awareness again, not because they lost it, but because they want to be accepted the way they were before. And without realizing it, they trade clarity for comfort, just to avoid that subtle tension that comes from being fully perceptive. But the reality is, once you begin to see clearly, you cannot return to not seeing. That awareness stays with you. You can choose to ignore it, you can choose to suppress how you respond to it, but it doesn't disappear. And over time, trying to move against that awareness creates its own kind of internal friction. You start to feel out of sync with yourself, like you're participating in something you no longer fully believe in. And that tension is often heavier than the distance you experience from others. Because at that point, it's no longer just about how people see you. It's about how honestly you're choosing to see the world around you. This is where awareness starts to demand restraint. And this is where a quieter form of discipline becomes necessary, not the kind that forces you to speak, but the kind that teaches you when not to. Because seeing more does not mean you need to reveal more. In fact, the more you understand, the more selective you become with what you express. You realize that most people are not asking to be understood at that level. They are asking to feel comfortable. And those are not the same thing. So instead of correcting every inconsistency or pointing out every pattern you notice, you begin to hold back. Not out of fear, but out of control. This restraint changes the way your awareness is perceived. Instead of feeling like exposure, it begins to feel like presence. You are still observing, still understanding, but you are no longer disrupting the interaction unnecessarily. You allow people to reveal themselves at their own pace, without forcing the moment. And this creates a different kind of dynamic. People may still sense that you see more than you say, but now it feels contained, measured, controlled. And that subtle shift often reduces the resistance you once felt, not because your awareness changed, but because your expression of it became more deliberate. Because control is what separates awareness from disruption. Over time, you start to understand that not every truth needs to be spoken and not every pattern needs to be exposed. There is a difference between seeing clearly and interfering constantly. Most people blur that line. They think awareness gives them the right to correct, to confront, to reveal. But in reality, that often creates unnecessary conflict and pushes people further away. The real advantage is not in what you point out, but in what you choose to hold, in what you notice without reacting, in what you understand without needing to prove it. And when you operate from that place, something shifts internally. You stop seeking validation for what you see. You no longer feel the need to confirm your perception by testing it against others. Instead, you trust your observations quietly. You let them guide your decisions, your boundaries, your positioning. And this creates a different kind of confidence. Not one that is visible or loud, but one that is steady and controlled. Because you're no longer trying to change people, you're simply adjusting how you move around them. If you've started noticing these patterns, then you're already seeing more than most people are comfortable with. But what you're seeing here is only the surface. There are deeper layers to how people react, how control shifts in silence, and how perception changes the way others treat you. I've put those ideas together in a short guide called The Art of Strategic Indifference. It's not for everyone, but if you want to understand how to observe without reacting and how to move without revealing too much, you'll know exactly how to use it. This is where awareness turns into leverage. Not because you use it against people, but because it allows you to navigate situations without being pulled into them. You begin to recognize intentions before they fully surface. You see patterns before they repeat. You sense when something is off without needing confirmation. And because of that, you make quieter, more precise decisions. You choose when to engage, when to step back, and when to remain completely neutral. And that level of control is rarely noticed directly, but it shapes every interaction you're part of. And this is where most people misunderstand what power actually looks like. They assume it comes from influence, from being persuasive, from being able to change how others think or behave. But real control often comes from something far quieter. It comes from understanding without reacting, from recognizing patterns without announcing them, from seeing intentions without needing to expose them. When you reach this point, you stop chasing outcomes in conversations. You stop trying to win every interaction or prove a point. Instead, you let people reveal themselves fully, without interruption, without guidance. And in doing that, you gain something far more valuable than agreement. You gain clarity. You see people as they are, not as they present themselves. And once you have that, your decisions become cleaner, your positioning becomes sharper, and your presence becomes harder to influence or manipulate. But most people never reach this point. And with that clarity, you begin to move differently in ways that are not immediately visible to others, but are felt over time. You stop investing energy into interactions that don't serve a purpose. You become more selective with your attention, more precise with your words, and more controlled in how you respond. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself in every situation or justify your perspective just to be understood. Instead, you allow silence to do part of the work for you. You allow people to sit with their own assumptions, their own interpretations, without stepping in to correct them. And while this may seem passive on the surface, it is anything but. It is a deliberate choice to maintain control over your position rather than giving it away through unnecessary engagement. Over time, this creates a quiet distance, but also a quiet authority that others begin to recognize, even if they can't fully define it. And this is the point where things become clear in a way that most people never fully articulate to themselves. When you see too much, people don't turn against you because you've done something wrong. They turn because your awareness removes the comfort they rely on. It disrupts the small illusions that keep interactions easy, predictable, and controlled. And instead of adjusting themselves, most people choose the easier path. They distance, they resist, or they quietly reposition you in their mind as someone who is difficult to read, difficult to influence, or simply not like them. But if you understand this, truly understand it, you stop taking it personally. You stop trying to fix it, and instead you begin to see it for what it is, a natural response to clarity in a world that depends on a certain level of blindness to function smoothly. And once you accept that, the way you move becomes simpler, but far more deliberate. You stop expecting everyone to be comfortable around you, and you stop measuring your position based on how easily others accept you. Instead, you begin to value accuracy over approval. You prioritize seeing clearly over being liked. And this shift changes everything, because when you no longer depend on external validation, you become harder to influence, harder to pressure, and harder to mislead. Your awareness is no longer something you try to hide or soften. It becomes something you carry quietly, something that guides how you engage, how you withdraw, and how you position yourself in every situation. And that, more than anything, is where the real advantage begins. And over time, you begin to notice something else that most people miss entirely. The same awareness that creates distance from some people starts to create a different kind of connection with others. Not everyone is uncomfortable with being seen clearly. A small number of people recognize it, and instead of resisting it, they respect it. They respond to that level of perception with honesty, with directness, with a kind of mutual understanding that doesn't rely on performance. These interactions are fewer, but they are more stable. There is less guessing, less managing, less subtle tension beneath the surface. And this is where you begin to see the trade-off more clearly. You lose surface-level ease with many, but you gain deeper alignment with a few. And for someone who sees clearly, that exchange is not a loss. It is a refinement. This is where the trade-off becomes clear. And when you reach this point, the question is no longer why people turn against you. That part becomes predictable. The real question becomes how you choose to carry what you see, whether you use it to interfere, to prove something, to challenge others directly, or whether you keep it contained, measured, and precise. Because the difference between someone who sees clearly and someone who understands power is not awareness itself, but control over how that awareness is used. One exposes everything, the other chooses exactly what to reveal and when to reveal it. And that distinction is what separates observation from strategy. In the end, seeing too much is not a weakness, and it is not something that needs to be corrected or softened to fit in. It is simply a shift in how you experience people, one that comes with its own set of consequences. Some of those consequences create distance, some create resistance, and some quietly reshape the way others relate to you. But none of that changes the value of what you see. Because once you begin to understand people at that level, you are no longer moving through interactions blindly. You are moving with awareness, with intention, and with a level of clarity that most never develop. And whether others accept that or not becomes secondary. What matters is that you understand exactly what is happening even when nothing is being said. And that is where the real shift settles in. You stop trying to be fully understood, and you stop expecting every interaction to feel smooth or effortless. You begin to accept that clarity has a cost, and that cost is often subtle resistance, quiet distance, or a change in how others respond to you. But at the same time, you also begin to recognize that this cost comes with something far more valuable. It gives you the ability to see situations for what they are, not for how they are presented. And once you reach that point, you are no longer navigating blindly. You are choosing your position with intention, understanding the dynamics at play, and moving through them with a level of control that most people never even realize is possible. If you look closely, you'll notice that the people who are the hardest to read are often the ones who understand the most. They don't rush to react. They don't reveal everything they think. They don't try to correct every situation or control every outcome. Instead, they watch, they listen, and they choose their moments carefully. That restraint is not hesitation, it's awareness applied with precision. And because of that, they rarely place themselves in positions where they can be easily influenced or misled. They allow others to speak, to act, to reveal more than they intend. And in doing so, they gather information without creating resistance, maintaining both clarity and control at the same time. This is what most people never learn to do. And over time, you begin to understand that this is not something to resist or correct, but something to refine. You don't need to dull your awareness to make others comfortable, and you don't need to prove what you see to validate it. The real discipline is in how you carry it, in knowing when to engage and when to remain silent, in recognizing that not every situation requires your insight, even if you clearly understand it. Because the more controlled your awareness becomes, the less friction it creates. And instead of turning against you, people begin to adjust around you without fully realizing why. In the end, the difference is simple. Most people look without seeing. A few begin to see and struggle with what it changes. But only a small number learn how to carry that awareness without letting it control them. And once you reach that point, people may still feel the shift in your presence, but it no longer works against you, because you are no longer reacting to what you see. You are simply aware of it, and that quiet awareness is what keeps you in control. And that is the part most people never realize. It was never your awareness that created the problem. It was how visible it became to others. Once you learn to hold it without displaying it, to understand without signaling it, the dynamic shifts again. You are still seeing everything, still understanding more than you say, but now it is contained, directed, controlled. And when awareness becomes controlled like that, it stops creating resistance and starts creating quiet influence. Not everything needs to be said out loud to be understood, and not everything you understand needs to be shared. What matters is that you see clearly and that you know what to do with it. If this changed the way you look at people, you'll know where to go next.